As Washington looks for a new head coach, the first option should be Arizona's head coach, Jedd Fisch.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast as we move into a coaching search. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies at Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day on this Sunday morning. As you're listening to this, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Lars, you and I we're having a fantastic conversation before we hit record, as we'd always do, but we have been talking about what everybody is talking about, which is Washington's next head coach. And you and I both, so we disagreed about a lot of things on our live show that we did on Friday afternoon after Kalen DeBoer took the Alabama job, and we'll probably get into more, some of the more outside the box candidates on the show as well. But we need to start with somebody who definitely is a very solid candidate. And that's Arizona head coach Jedd Fisch, where he probably brings some solid transfers with him. We've seen what he's built in Arizona, which ended the year as a top 10 program, who gave the Huskies quite a fight at the end of September. And everything he's built down there just seems like he would be the choice for sustainable success. And it doesn't sound like Washington will be the only, I'm just going to say football team, because it looks like he might get some pro interest after the head coach either.
Right. And see, that's kind of the thing with John Stamos, a.k.a. Jedd Fisch, where, when you're talking about replacements for your next coach, you don't want to be in the situation 2 years from now, right? Washington has basically been in a 2-year revolving door at the head football coaching position for the past 4 years for two different reasons, right? One, you have a cataclysmic fall off under Jimmy Lake, so you want to fire him after a second season, right? Like that's it's irreparable harm if Jed Cohen.
Different story, yeah.
But the problem is going 2 year to 2 year now with Kalen leaving to take the Alabama job. You want a coach who we thought was going to be like Kalen DeBoer, right? Where he's here for at least 4 or 5 years, right? That's where he was at Sioux Falls for, I believe, 4 or 5 as the head coach. He was a coordinator beforehand, but I'm talking just strictly head coaching period. You want a guy at least for 5 years, right? Because that's what you want to build multiple classes. Jedd Fisch, the only knock against him, because I firmly believe I said Lance Liepold is my number one choice, but Jed and Lance are kind of 1A, 1B right there for me. And so we'll talk about Jedd Fisch first. The only thing that scares me about him is that NFL interest, where what's to prevent him 2 years from now from taking the Seahawks head coaching job or from taking any number of potential head coaching openings, knowing the more he wins and the better he looks. Now his name has been not revised, but kind of, refreshed in the NFL world to where now, hey, that's kind of the pinnacle of success. Who doesn't want to coach in the NFL? Even I know Kalen DeBoer wants to coach in the NFL. So, and that's not a shot at Kalen because he took the Alabama job. I'm saying he's stated before, I want to go to the NFL at some point. The only other job I would take is Alabama. So like that, for Washington fans saying Kalen DeBoer didn't keep his word, he actually kept his word. Just to be clear. But with that being said, you want to coach. So Jedd Fisch would be a great 2 or 3 year hire. I just don't know if he could definitively say, I will be here 5 years from now.
So, but that's going to be a whole different point of discussion. One that I did kind of want to get into. So I'll just I have a little rant about that I'll do now. How do you keep a coach here long-term? And it's showing a commitment to winning and a commitment to investing in the coach, and not just making sure that they're one of the highest paid coaches in the country, but that they're going to have the resources at their disposal to win year in and year out. And this is where, because we had some people in our comments on our last live show saying, you guys need to put more blame on Troy Dannen. This is his fault. Where you and I disagree with that sentiment, where we don't think that it can be, because especially shout out to our buddy Christian Capel, friend of the pod over at On Lake, who put out a fantastic article about the departure of Kalen DeBoer, who was able to confirm some of the things that we were saying. I know that he heard them independent of us, is that there was a significant offer on the table for Kalen DeBoer. And as he put it in his article, saying that would have made him one of the top 10 coaches highest paid coaches in college football, which is a significant amount. Make sure you can get anybody to stay. But it all comes down to some of the other resources, the commitment to winning, whether it be, competitive edge fund, whether it be assistant coach salary pool, whether it be just anything along those lines. And that's something that I'm really curious to see with whoever the next head coach is going to be, which will be finalized, before it. We'll see an announcement any day now with, it'll probably be this, or, hey, there's gonna be a special press conference called on this date at this time. So make sure you're there, which Lars, you and I will absolutely be there. But on top of that, it's just going to be very curious to see what kind of investment Troy Dannen and this athletic department is willing to make in that coach. Because let's say they throw Jedd Fisch. This is just a hypothetical where Kalen DeBoer already had a top 15 salary pool in terms of assistant coaches. Let's say they give Jedd Fisch, because this is example we're going with this scenario. Let's say they give him a top 5 head coaching pool or assistant coaching salary pool. That in itself is a commitment to winning. That plus, okay, we're going to make sure that we can donate, or I'm going to make sure I can fundraise this much, X dollars, Y dollars, to go into Motley Futures, to go into the competitive edge fund, to make sure that you can recruit at the highest level possible, because that's just all part of the game now. That's what's more important to me, because if you can show that kind of a commitment to a coach, maybe they'll want to stick around a little bit longer instead of having to take the pressure of the NFL or having to move on to that level and just say, no, I can win at Washington. I can achieve everything that I want to do professionally in terms of winning here at Washington. So why not ride it out here?
Yeah, no, and that's a fair point. But also, I think an extension of that comes on, this is not a shot at the fan base, but I do think we've now seen what this fan base means and what it can become, right? You saw it firsthand, how many people were down in New Orleans and down in Houston.
Yeah.
And making the trip and making the effort to say, hey, you know what? I want to support this team. I want to be involved. I want to, contribute to Motley Futures. I want to do X, Y, and Z. And then you see the understandable vitriol, right? When Kalen DeBoer leaves, says, oh, hey, my season tickets are done. I'll never give money to the school again. It's like, well, I understand the frustration, but why not double down on your anger and use it to the next coach and say, hey, you know what? That guy left us. We're going to show the old guy. And again, you're not actually showing it, right? But you're going to show the new guy by supporting and investing and doing all that from a fan perspective, so that Troy Dannen's job is easier to say, hey, we do have this crazy fan base who wants to support you. We do have this financial support backing you. We do have all these things that won't just go away because our former head coach left and now all the fans are pissed off again.
So, and there's one reason why Jedd Fisch is a great hire, because I saw a really fantastic tweet. It was right before the team left for the national championship. And it was for that send-off that they had outside of Husky Stadium. And I can't remember who put it out there. Shout out to whoever it was, because it was a fantastic point. And it said, this is a message to Troy Dannen, to Kalen DeBoer, because this was, when is this contract going to get signed, that this level of passion and this level of dedication from the fan base is available whenever you want it. You just have to show that commitment to proving to whoever this fan was that we can see this every single year. And that's why you and I like Jedd Fisch, where you see that and you can bring in a Noah Fafita, right? Or even if, let's say that doesn't happen, work with Austin Mack, who as of when we're recording this at 2:30 on a Saturday afternoon has not entered the transfer portal. And that's stuff we're going to get into over the coming days after the head coach is decided in terms of roster turnover, whatever we might see on that front. But that's one of the reasons that we like Jedd Fisch, where he can bring in guys like that, a Tatairoa McMillan, or that's a big time playmaker. Again, same thing, where we'll see what that's like in terms of roster turnover and all those sort of things. But Jedd Fisch is somebody who's proven he can bring in this top tier talent and develop it and make sure that it's performing at a high level. So I know that's one of the reasons that you and I like Jed, but we're going to get into some of the other top candidates, because this same kind of fandom, money, all of these sort of things is available to them. But we're going to take a quick break real fast. And we're going to send a message to our good friends over at FanDuel because the NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Also, recommendation, because that game got moved to Monday. Great bet. Josh Allen, anytime touchdown in that Bills Steelers game. That usually hits. I would highly recommend that because he loves to run the ball in the red zone. I think that'd be a great bet. And that's $150 in bonus bets for you when you place that bet, win or lose. The app is so easy to use. There's so many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. Find bets in the Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. So, Lars, let's talk about some of these other top candidates that we've got here. And you talked about Lance Leipold. I want to talk about Chris Klieman in this segment, but we need to start real quickly with the top obvious internal candidate. That's Ryan Grubb.
Yeah, that's kind of the elephant in the room, right? To where we saw some reports earlier over the weekend about potentially a push for JaMarcus Shephard. And as we discussed off air, if that's the push, that means Ryan Grubb is gone. Because that to both of us, we agreed, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but both of us agreed that it's kind of a hard sell for Grubb to, and it's not a shot at either one, right? But if you're promoting Shephard to head coach, how do you as Ryan Grubb see your other assistant get promoted over you,
right? And
your other former head coach leave you, and now you're going to stay in your same position? To me, that seems like a hard sell. So if Shephard, again, Ryan Grubb is obviously the internal candidate, but if he follows Kalen DeBoer to Alabama, then JaMarcus Shephard becomes an intriguing candidate because it's kind of parlay this because we're talking about Ryan Grubb, but I do think, what do you think? 20 per 20, 80, he stays? 20% stays, 80% gone?
Yeah,
90, 90-10 more so, but
yeah, it's if he doesn't get the job, he's not going to be around. Like it just feels like it's that simple.
Exactly. And I do think, not parlaying what we said on the last show about, how Jimmy Lake was basically 36 hours later was named the head coach after Peterson resigned. It was actually the same announcement, but it was like 36 hours from after the Apple Cup. So if Ryan Grubb isn't announced as the head coach on Monday or Sunday, then I would be very surprised if he actually is the choice. So then moving on to the next one, JaMarcus Shephard does kind of offer an interesting option because, again, the problem is, and this is where Washington fans might push back because, and rightly so, because you're going from an established former national championship winning head coach to a first-time head coach. Now, yep. JaMarcus Shephard is the guy. He is AG. He is the real one of real ones. Do you want to bet a first-time head coach coming off a national championship with, by the way, this is not a shot at JaMarcus, but because he's got all the relationships, right? He's a great person. I think he could be a fantastic head coach one day.
Absolutely.
I just don't know if right now is that time, right? Maybe get an offensive coordinator role for a couple of years, really start to build up into it, and then maybe 4 or 5 years down the line, you can get a Power 5 job. I just don't know if now is the right time to bet on that, and especially coming off a national championship.
So let's switch gears here and talk about some of these external candidates, where whoever it might be. So I want to start with Chris Klieman at Kansas State, where I think that would be a really interesting hire. He's done a really good job of helping build that program up. One guy that you and I were really intrigued by when he was coming out of high school, because UW was really high on him before he decided to stay home and go to Kansas State, was quarterback Avery Johnson. I still think he's a really impressive prospect. I think that he's got a lot of room to grow and develop. And, maybe that's the kind of guy that Klieman would take with him, say he takes this job. Where I'm really intrigued by that aspect, but then let's say that happens. Who the one holdover from the Peterson Lake staff to Kalen DeBoer staff was Scott Huff. If you were picking any assistant coach, not including coordinators, the one guy that I would probably pick, and I know you and I both love Scott Huff, but the one guy that I would pick to make sure that he stays on staff is JaMarcus Shephard. That I would find any way possible to make sure that guy stays on the staff. So I feel that there's an easier, and because you were talking about Grubb, there's an easier path to keep him. And Chris Klieman would be a really good offensive coach. I think he's done a lot of really nice things down there in the Big 12. And in this world of the Power 2 conferences as kind of is now, it would be a step up for him. The buyout wouldn't be horrible. And I think that there's a lot of really interesting things that you can just kind of look at when it comes to what he would bring to Washington.
Yeah, well, the note about the buyout, Jedd Fisch, Lance Liepold, and Chris Klieman all have basically the same buyout of $5 to $6 million. The first two are $6 million. I believe Klieman is $5 million. I could be wrong, or maybe that's what he's making. I don't know, but I know for a fact it's not double digits. So regardless, the money the $12 million that you're getting from Alabama, you can put half of it towards the buyout and half towards the assistant pool.
Yeah,
right. So that to me is not an issue. I do think it would. Yeah, to your point, and this kind of ties in even more so with Jedd Fisch as well, but all of them in general. You might want to bring a different blocking scheme. You might want to bring a different offense. The one thing you really can't replicate, especially in any of those schools, is the receiver position. So JaMarcus could easily be, when you look at some of the, no disrespect to the coaches on Jedd Fisch's staff, Klieman's staff, or Liepold's staff, but none of them are JaMarcus Shephard. So like that, and I'm not just saying that to state the obvious, but like Jimmy Doherty, I believe, is the quarterback's coach and passing game coordinator. I can't think off the top of my head who the receivers coach is at any of the three schools. So it tells me, okay, you can bring in Avery Johnson, you can bring in Noah Fafita. Brennan Carroll would be a perfect offensive line replacement for Scott Huff if he goes to Alabama with DeBoer. So those are other ones. But then the receiver position is kind of the one that's like, hey, we're going to just leave you right there. We'll give you 1.2, 1.5 to be the receivers coach and offensive coordinator or co-coordinator or whatever. Pay JaMarcus what he wants. Just keep him here. That's all you really got to do. And I think all of these coaches would understand that. I think if you're bringing in Chris Klieman, because that's kind of what they did with Huff, what DeBoer did with Huff, where they looked at him and said, okay, you had a really terrible 21 season, but everything other than that has been fine. So, like, why would we not keep this really good guy who's a glue guy, who's a great coach and a great recruiter? So that's why you keep JaMarcus Shephard by any means necessary. The only reason JaMarcus would leave is if Washington doesn't want him, the new coach doesn't want him, or he gets a just blown away offer from Alabama. The latter, I don't think was a factor. I just think it's a matter of who do you get to replace him, and then does he have a relationship with Shephard, or does he have any familiarity and understanding, hey, this is the guy you got to keep, right? And I think the unique part is, and actually interesting, do you know the fact that Chris Klieman finished with more points per game than Washington did this season?
Did not know that. That is a nice stat to have.
Go ahead.
In that same vein, though, sorry, I was going to say, like, let's talk about Lance Liepold because we're going to move on, and we're going to talk some some outside the box candidates whose names have been thrown out there that maybe you and I like, maybe you and I don't like, because we want to make sure that we can cover as many guys as we possibly can on this episode.
Yeah, so Lance Liepold is the one for me where very similar to DeBoer's path. And again, I know fans are going to hate hearing the name DeBoer, but that's kind of the way this world in college football is going, especially for a school like Washington, where you're not going to hire the blue blood away, right? You're not going to hire Kalen DeBoer away from Alabama. You're not going to hire Billy Napier away from Florida. You kind of have to go and find the not lower level guys, but like the guys who have worked their way up from the lower level that are now in that mid tier to where you can bring them to the Big Ten upper tier. Like this move to the Big Ten now separates you from the Big 12. So Lance Liepold, or Chris Klieman, even a Jedd Fisch, where, hey guys, I know you're going to be in the Big 12 next year, but that is kind of the bottom tier of the upper two conferences here. You're kind of hanging around the ACC world here. Like, I say the ACC, for example, you're not going to go get Dabo Swinney in any way. You're not going to go get an established coach like that. But you're not going to go get an established coach like that. You need to go get a coach establishing himself, like DeBoer was at Fresno, like Lance Leipold has been at Kansas, and Chris Klieman at Tech and Kansas State, where they've shown they can recruit. I mean, Avery Johnson was a top target of Washington and Ryan Grubb before he ended up going to Kansas State. So all of these kind of similarities are working in Washington's favor. It's just a matter of who can Troy Dannen convince? Because again, as much as we love Shephard, if you go with an offensive coordinator hire, you have set this program back so far.
So I like where your head's at with that. And I want to talk about the recruiting angle of that a little bit, because one name we have to mention this really quickly, because right before we press record, 4-star edge rusher Noah Carter did decide to decommit from Washington. Not that we blame him, because we definitely don't. Yeah. But one guy who Washington was also in the running for around the time when Noah Carter committed that did take an official visit that really did seem to like things up here is a Kansas commit, a Lance Liepold commit, Deshaun Warner, another 4-star edge rusher who rose really late in the process. And, you talk about bringing guys with him. That'd be one guy that I'd be really curious to see if he says, oh yeah, no, I really liked what was going on over there. Maybe I'm interested in following my head coach to go up there and see what that's like. But we're going to get to, because we want to get to a couple other names. I know there are some outside the box candidates. We'll have a couple discussions about some interesting names that were on Pete Thamel's list that he originally tweeted out a couple of days ago after this news broke. But we got to take one more break. And we're going to give a shout out to our good friends over at GameTime, because you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. GameTime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. It's so easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area, and you get to see a view from every single seat in the venue, so you know exactly what your view is going to look like before you buy. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. The all-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out, and you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets at the GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. So there are a lot of names that are kind of being thrown around there, and I feel like the first one that we should concentrate on is Kyle Whittingham, because I don't think that either of us believe that Kyle Whittingham would leave Utah and everything he's built there to come coach at Washington, because, and it's not saying like, oh, Utah's a better job, anything like that. Kyle Whittingham has just established himself there. One of the reasons I wanted to bring that name up is because that's the kind of guy that Washington should be looking for on this search. Somebody who wants to establish himself and be a name like that and talk about a lot of the same things that DeBoer did. And then, of course, he takes the Alabama job, but that's besides the point, where it's somebody who wants to be here for a long time, because in this world where you talked about it before, right, where it's, oh, I want to be around for like 4 or 5 years, build something and then continue on my journey, where it's, no, I really want to stay and build this program and do a lot of good things here. And I think that Kyle Whittingham is the perfect model for that. Okay, this is what we hope that he can be like, where, obviously you want to aim higher in terms of success, but he's won a couple of Pac-12 championships. He's done a lot of really good things there, but it's just kind of, all right, we see this and let's level up a little bit. But I think that's a really good, just kind of name to try to model this search after.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest comparison, in a similar vein, would be you want a Chris Peterson, right? Where like when Chris Peterson came from Boise State, he was established. It was a level up move, but you also knew, despite all the USC hoopla and all that stuff. I mean, Chris Peterson has stated multiple times he didn't even take an interview at USC. So some people still have it in their head that he was going to go to USC at some point, just like the same people said, oh, watch out for Jen Cohen at USC with Kalen DeBoer. It's like, no, Kalen ain't going down to rejoin Jen. He's going to one job and one job only, and that's Alabama. And look what happened. So with that being said, you're now looking at, but in that same model, right, where you want a guy who you can level up, and it doesn't have to be an offensive coordinator, right? Because I think that you should be able to get an established head coach, which is why you're looking at a Liepold, a Klieman. There's a couple of names that we haven't mentioned, and I just want to throw out because I know since we're not in the segment for the audio only listeners of the out of the box candidates, these are the 0.1% chance people or 1% chance people. We're just going to throw out two names. Okay. Urban Meyer.
Oh, all right. I don't even want to go down this road. And you know what? This is fair because I threw out Pete Carroll and you had a similar reaction. So this is fair. I will be circling back around to that, by the way.
But to be fair, no. So if you bring in Jedd Fisch, who's on his staff, as I mentioned?
Sure.
Brennan Carroll.
Yeah, Brennan Carroll. Great. Yeah, Brennan Carroll. Yeah, that's a good one.
Son of former Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll, who I guarantee you would be, if Jed says, hey, you know what, you want to be my GM or you want to be my, player personnel guy where you don't have to coach, you can kind of, or maybe an analyst, right? You can be in the building, you can be in, I guarantee you Jedd Fisch will have Pete Carroll involved somehow in that operation. And again, but notice how I suggested it the first day on the live show, and then you suggested it, and then people were like on Twitter were like, "Hey, what about Pete Carroll? What about Pete Carroll?" I'm like, I suggested it as an idea, and here we are potentially actually considering it. But the other name, Jimbo Fisher.
I don't know if I want to go down that road either.
So
I understand your point. I do
because the thing that there's 3 tiers to the search, right? There's the tier A, which we talked about in the first segment: Jedd Fisch, Klieman, Liepold, Kyle Whittingham, the established head coach,
Ryan Grubb, yeah.
Well, no. Then Ryan
would
Grubb
you consider him? You'd consider him tier 2. Okay.
Tier 2: JaMarcus Shephard, Ryan Grubb, the internal promotion option. Maybe you throw in Brennan Carroll in that mix. You know, an assistant who's been rising but is not a current head coach and has not been a head coach. Option C, level 3, is if we strike out on all those guys and we still want to go for a home run and higher. Right. That's a separate problem in of itself. But if we don't get those guys and we want to go for broke, I mean, the only other out of the box name that somebody tweeted at me, which these are to be clear, I'm not saying I am reporting these names, suggesting these names. These are just out of the box names that now we're at this point in this curse. Deion Sanders. That'd
be interesting. That would be a lot of fun for everybody involved. But so when I thought outside the box, I thought of another name that showed up on the Pete Thamel list because like one thing that you and I can say is there have not been a lot of leaks about this. There haven't been any leaks that either you or I have heard like, oh, this guy's interviewed. We're sure that Ryan Grubb has interviewed, but like outside of that, there really isn't anything that can be super definitive of like, oh yeah, this guy has, this guy hasn't. There hasn't been anything like that that's gone on. Yeah. But one name that showed up on that list that I looked at and I said no was Kalani Sitake at BYU, where I saw that and I was just like, no offense, but you can aim so much higher than that. And that's one of the reasons why if you're going to throw out Urban Meyer and Jimbo Fisher, I want to circle back around to this Pete Carroll conversation. Okay. Because the Pete Carroll conversation, especially when you talk about his son, right, who's coaching in college football, doing a really good job, you have that angle to it all. You have the angle of Pete was pushed out in Seattle. He was pushed out by the Seahawks, and he clearly still has the itch to coach. And whereas you and I just talked about getting an established guy, if there is one person that can buck that trend, that can say, all right, I'm going to be here for a couple of years, but I'm going to, I want to choose my words very carefully when I say this, but leave the place in a better, leave the program in a better position and leave it set up for the long term. That's something that Pete Carroll would do. Because he understands where he's at in his career. He understands that if he comes here, yeah, this is probably going to be my final coaching gig. And we know what he's done as a recruiter in his time in college. We know what he's done as a coach. And we know what he's done as a motivator. We know that he can do all those things, can get guys to the NFL, can do it at a high level, can bring in players that can say, in the same vein that you just talked about Deion Sanders, where it's probably a different kind of, just a recruiting pitch, but it's who wouldn't want to play for Pete Carroll? I feel like that's an angle that needs to be discussed in all this because he's a local guy now. He's out of a job and would have a lot of fun doing it and you talked about the fan base. You talked about how rough it has been to just kind of see where this program was a week ago to where it is now. One guy that would infuse a whole lot of life and a whole lot of energy into this program would be Pete Carroll.
Well, and as we're talking about it, we're talking about as Pete Carroll being the head coach, right? Just to be clear.
Yeah.
Because the reason why I emphasize that is there's also a bridge to keep Ryan Grubb, because Pete Carroll maybe would have, but again, when you look at his track record with the Seahawks, not really a great offensive picker. Sure. And again, as we discussed on the other show, keep Cliff Kingsbury, almost name escaped me there.
I don't want to go down that road.
No. But I'm saying for that point, instead of bringing some old USC guys, keep those guys away from this operation. Keep Ryan Grubb in his position. Keep JaMarcus Shephard in his position. Pete Carroll's a players coach, so he would want to keep some of those guys around, whether Huff leaves or not. But then he could convince Brennan Carroll to come up from Arizona staff. Sure. He could convince a few other guys to come up from his staff. And then maybe Grubb takes that job 3 years from now, where he's worked under Carroll, played a little bit more, or even JaMarcus Shephard. Either one of those guys, right? Because both of them will have now been in the program longer and been able to actually be more established. Not that they're not established now, because obviously they're established as assistants. The question is, can you bet on them as a head coach versus if you set yourself back? So I think Pete Carroll, and again, I know it's ludicrous. I know it sounds ludicrous, but there's no buyout. Experience, winner, in the market, knows everything. Had UW over at the VMAC multiple times under Kalen DeBoer, so he's seen the players, knows what it would take. It's not crazy. Not crazy.
No, it's not. It's not crazy at all.
And I do want to add really quick, because just really quick. Mac Brown at UNC made this possible, where he left the sport for a long time, came back, and is still not winning national championships, but he's got Drake May. He's had a pretty good success at UNC. So
he's had some nice recruiting wins too.
And it's not out. So exactly. He's shown that he can recruit. So it's not out of the realm for two coaches who played in the national championship back in the mid 2000s to run it back in this decade and saying, hey, you know what? Nobody would have imagined Mac Brown at UNC 5-10 years ago. So who would imagine Pete Carroll at Washington? And again, it's a West Coast school, so it's not like he's going to Georgia or Florida or, doing all this. He's a West Coast guy, stays on the West Coast.
He doesn't have to move.
Doesn't have to move. And also, we saw this year with Kalen DeBoer, of all people, girl, dad, persona non grata. Cedric the Entertainer and Anthony Anderson showing up for Kings of Comedy in the Oregon game. Pete Carroll could do even more than that. So, we saw Julio Rodriguez, right? So DeBoer can do it. DeBoer, right? No shot against the man. I love the man. But DeBoer can do that. He's not exactly the guy that's the rah-rah, let me bring in the celebrities. When he did that, I'm thinking, okay, Carroll can just take this to another level here.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I feel like that's a really great place to wrap this up, because there's going to be so much more coaching search news over the next couple of days. So please just make sure you stay right here with us on Locked On Huskies. Lars, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. And to make sure you stay up to date with all the latest coaching search news, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We are there. We're everywhere. We're trying to update this channel with new content every single day. As you know now, there's a whole ton of news to discuss. So thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you like the video. Leave us a 5-star review if you're audio only. Leave us a comment down below. It all helps the channel out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Monday.